Hey Reddit, I never thought I'd be in a position to write this, but here I am. I'm a 35-year-old male and I've been feeling a lot of emotions lately. Anger, betrayal, and I need some unbiased opinions. I'm going to try to lay this all out, but it's a long story, so if you would, please bear with me. Now, my family has owned a business for generations. It's a small manufacturing company that was started by my grandfather over 60 years ago. Now, growing up, the business was always a big part of my life. Now, my dad, he's 65, he's obviously male, took over when my grandfather retired, and it became his passion. I'm the eldest of 3 children, with a younger brother, 33-year-old male, and a sister, 30-year-old female. While I was always involved in the business, neither of my siblings showed much interest at all. My brother, he was more into tech, and my sister was a social worker. They both had their own paths, and that was fine. Well, about 8 years ago, the business started to struggle. My dad wasn't keeping up with the times, and the company began to lose money and fast. He was resistant to change, refusing to upgrade the machinery, adopt modern marketing strategies, or even explore new product lines. Now, I was working elsewhere at the time, but it was heartbreaking to watch something that had been such a big part of our family just start to crumble. Now, my dad was too proud to ask for help, but it was clear he was in over his head. So I decided to step in. I left my well-paying job to join the family business full-time. I knew it was a huge risk, but I believed I could help turn things around. I sat down with my dad and I laid out a plan. We needed to modernize, cut down on unnecessary expenses, and target new markets. He was reluctant at first, but eventually he agreed. Now, over the next few years, I poured everything I had into the business. I worked long hours, often 7 days a week, to pull it out of the red. I secured loans, negotiated new contracts, and streamlined operations. I even put in my own savings, nearly everything I had, into the company to try to keep it afloat. It was a slow process, but we started to see some improvement. Then, within a few years, we were back into black, and the future was looking brighter. I was proud of what we'd accomplished, and I felt like I had finally earned my father's respect. Now, my siblings were still largely uninvolved, which I didn't mind. I wasn't doing it for them. I was doing it for the family legacy and because I believed in what we could achieve. Now, things took a turn about 2 years ago when my dad decided he wanted to retire. I was more than ready to take over. I'd been running the day-to-day operations for years by then, and I felt I was a natural choice. However, my dad had other ideas. He called a family meeting where he announced that he was dividing ownership of the company equally between the 3 of us, me, my brother, and my sister. I was shocked. My siblings had shown no interest in the business, contributed nothing to its revival, and had no understanding of how it operated. I tried to reason with my dad, explaining that I had been the one keeping the business alive and that a 3-way split would only complicate things, but he was firm, saying it was only fair that all his children get an equal share. Now, my brother and sister, who had never cared about the business before, suddenly seemed very interested now that there were ownerships at stake. What happened next was a complete nightmare. My siblings, emboldened by their new title, started making demands and pushing for changes they didn't understand. Now, my brother, with his tech background, wanted to pivot the company towards software, which made absolutely no sense given our resources and expertise. Now, my sister wanted to use the company as a platform for social initiatives, which, while noble, wasn't financially viable for a struggling manufacturing business. They started overruling my decisions, leveraging their own ownership status to push through their ill-conceived ideas. Now, I tried to make them see reason, explaining how the business worked and why their ideas were not feasible, but they wouldn't listen. They accused me of being controlling and refusing to adapt to new times. Now, my dad, now officially retired, stayed out of the conflict, saying it was up to us to work things out. Now, I felt like I was losing control over everything I'd worked so hard to build. Now, things came to a head when my siblings decided they wanted to take out a massive loan to fund their new direction for the company. I was vehemently against it. We had just managed to get back on stable footing, and taking on more debt would be catastrophic. They ignored my concerns and went behind my back to get my father's approval to use the company's assets as collateral. I was outvoted, and when the loan went through, predictably, their plans failed spectacularly. The new direction they were pushing for was a complete disaster. We lost several key clients, incurred massive debts, and morale among the employees plummeted. I tried to salvage what I could, but it was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. Every time I tried to implement damage control, my siblings would interfere, convinced they knew better. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to leave the company. It was one of the hardest decisions I'd ever made, but I couldn't stand by and watch them destroy everything I had worked so hard to save. I told my dad I was stepping down, and he was visibly upset, but I think he realized there was nothing more I could do. My brother and sister seemed almost relieved, eager to have free reign without my meddling. I walked away with nothing. All the money I'd put into the business was gone, and I had no stake left in the company. I'd given up years of my life, a secure career, and my savings to save the family business, only to be pushed out by my own family. I felt betrayed. I felt hurt and completely disillusioned. That was a year ago. Since then, I've been trying to rebuild my life. Now, I managed to get a job in my old field, and while it's been tough starting over, I've been managing. I've had little contact with my family since then, except for the occasional update from my dad, who still tries to keep the peace. And here's where things get interesting. The business, under my siblings' leadership, has been floundering. The massive debt they took on, combined with the poor management decisions, has driven the company to the brink of bankruptcy. Several of our longtime employees, they've left, and they've been struggling to keep the lights on. My dad has called me a few times, subtly hinting that they might need my help to turn things around again. Now, my siblings, predictably, haven't reached out themselves, too proud to admit they messed up. Now, a few weeks ago, I heard from a former colleague that the company was officially going under. My brother and sister scrambling, trying to find investors to bail them out, but no one is willing to touch the sinking ship. And you know what? I feel a sense of satisfaction watching it all unfold. It's like karma is finally catching up with them. They took something I worked so hard to save and drove it in the ground. And now they're paying the price. I know it's petty, but I can't help feeling a sense of vindication. I gave everything to that business. They treated me like I was nothing. Now they're getting a taste of what it feels like to lose everything. Now, my dad has been calling me more frequently, asking if there's any way I can find it in my heart to help them, but I've been ignoring his calls. Part of me wants to swoop in and save the day to prove to everyone that I was right all along, but another part of me wants to let them drown in the mess they've created. My friends are divided on the issue now. Some say I should walk away and let them deal with the consequences of their actions. Others think I should step in, not for them, but for the legacy of the business and the employees who might lose their jobs. Now, I'm torn. I don't want to be the kind of person who takes pleasure in someone else's misfortune, especially when it's my own family. But at the same time, I can't ignore the fact that they betrayed me. They pushed me out, and now they want my help. I've been thinking a lot about what to do next. Part of me wants to reach out to the employees who are still there and see if there's any way to help them without getting directly involved with my siblings again. But I don't know if that's even possible at this point. The other part of me just wants to let it all burn, to let my siblings see what it's like to fail and live with the consequences of their actions. I feel like if I step in now, I'm just enabling their behavior. They made their bed and they should have to lie in it. But then there's the guilt in knowing that my family's legacy is at stake, that the business my grandfather built from the ground up could disappear because of this. And there's the guilt from knowing that people's livelihoods are on the line. My dad called me again last night, practically begging me to reconsider. He said he's worried about what will happen if the business goes under, that it will destroy our family, and that my siblings are just kids who made a mistake and they need me to fix it. I told him I needed to think, but I could hear the desperation in his voice. I've been going over the numbers in my head, trying to figure out if there's any way to save the business at this point. It would take a lot of work and a lot of capital. Capital I don't have anymore. I'd have to convince the banks to extend credit, find new investors, and implement a whole new strategy to turn things around. It's possible, but it's a long shot. So, Reddit, am I the a-hole for feeling this way? Am I wrong and to try to save the business one more time, or is it finally time for me to walk away for good and let the chips fall where they may? Guys, this next story up. The landlord put me through 3 years of hell. I'm Brian. Let's get into this story. Now, my landlord was a terrible human being. Honestly, calling him a human is even pushing it. Just a few things he had done to me over the past 3 years. Stole my dryer and other household products that are in a common area made me pay for a plumbing repair, which was deemed normal wear and tear. Tried breaking into my house, retaliated against me because I went to my lawyer after he sent me a letter about a parking spot. He tried charging me an extra $150 a month, mind you. Now, I was never late for rent in 3 years, except for when he made me pay for the plumbing repair. So the next month, I was a couple days late. The list goes on. Now, this apartment was nowhere near nice. I found out the plumbing was illegal. He left me with a porch for years that has severe safety issues. The ceiling paint was always falling down, gas heater was not up to code, and so on. I finally got my chance to leave after he wanted to raise my rent to $500 a month. He will do anything and everything to get more money out of his tenant. So I called the building inspector 4 days before I left. I told him everything. The porch, when he finally replaced it, didn't have a permit. It was definitely not up to code. I told him about the plumbing and the heater. I went on and on. The inspector came over the very next day. I saw him taking measurements. Each violation is a $500 a day fine until it's fixed. I honestly don't know what happened, but my God, did it feel good to finally get back at him. He's at the very least on the town's radar. A week before I moved out, he tried telling me I needed to be out at a specific time. I never responded, and where I live, that's not how it works. He tried to threaten me with the police if I wasn't gone. Well, I went to the police myself that morning to warn them. The landlord did come by, threatened me, and harassed me. I called the police, and they informed him I was in the right. Long story short, he had broken into my apartment. I had left to go to storage. Now, while I was gone, he nailed my door shut. I told the police to get the supervisor because I was over being harassed by this guy. Go figure, he left before the supervisor could get there. I'm positive he knew he'd be arrested on site. Got the police report. They're charging him with a felony for breaking and entering. Fines plus a charge? Don't be a jerk to good people. Advice for other people. Calabria Funding says this. I had a landlord that threatened to evict us if our baby did not stop crying. Now, in addition to a small discrimination settlement, I also got his unpermitted renovation of half of the building red tagged by the building department. After we left, I ran into him and he was still an a-hole. I made sure to tell him I called the building department. Watching his head almost explode was quite nice. That crap bird I'm looking to buy, but my current landlords don't even live in the state. I take care of any issues unless it's big. Much better here, though. Another comment from Now I Know My Agency's ABCs. That person is evil. Happy Goth Kitty says there's a reason most landlords are called scumlords. Extravagant Beetle says, as someone who has lived in crappy condos with bad soundproofing, I do wish there were more rules about babies and kids in apartments. I realize it's often totally out of the parents' control, but it's incredibly annoying when someone new moves in and you're stuck listening to their baby crying. Apprehensive Yak 4627 says maybe there should be more rules about soundproofing instead. Paladin Arano says this is something that I cannot agree with enough.